Good evening and welcome to a meeting of the Hunterdon Central Regional High School Board of Education. Please be advised that this and all meetings of the board are open to the public and media, consistent with the Open Public Meetings Act, and an advance notice required therein has been provided. Meeting notice was also posted from the boardroom of the Upper School campus, sent to the Courier News, Star Ledger, Express Times, and the Hunterdon County Democrat, and sent to the clerks of Delaware Township, East Amwell Township, Flemington Borough, Raritan Township, and Reddington Township. The public will have an opportunity to be heard as shown on the agenda. Please stand for a flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can I have a roll call, please?
Here. Here.
Here. We have 3 items of correspondence as noted on the agenda. And now, Dr. Moore, I'd like to turn it over to you for your superintendent's report.
All right, thank you. We want to thank the boards and my staff and everyone here for this transition back to the 2 meeting per month format. And when we ran this schedule in the past, we typically used the first meeting for discussion as much as possible and tried to reserve as much action as possible for the second meeting. Tonight, we do have a few action items to take, especially in personnel as we adjust to this new schedule, but do know that if there's any action on the personnel items agenda that you'd want to table until the 25th, we're certainly able to do that too. It's just we have some time-sensitive stuff there that if you feel comfortable moving it tonight, we'd be good to go. There are 2 items on the personnel agenda that I want to point out specifically. Both of those are sidebars. One is a sidebar with the Administrators Association and with the Education Association. That's the vast majority of our employees between those 2 associations. And this sidebar allows them a safety net of days in the event that they need to take care of someone at home who is ill with COVID or who is quarantining as a result of being a close contact, a young child, for example. And staff members here have access to non-accumulative sick days in the event that they need them, but they currently have to use up all of those days all of their paid days before they can access those non-accumulated days. And the law doesn't typically allow for, in schools, for an individual to take a sick day to take care of somebody else. So we saw a need for a safety net there, and that'll be a valuable thing for our folks to be able to access those non-accumulative sick days as family illness days up front if they need them under those very specific circumstances. The other sidebar is a response to a crisis, but also a package that I think is really well deserved. The whole nation, as you know, has been experiencing a bus driver shortage, and the pandemic has only made that worse. Our transportation office is stretched terribly thin as they struggle to get kids to school, to get kids home from school, to get kids to extracurricular activities. We are combining routes where we can. We're struggling. They've succeeded, but we have to act now as our transportation department is running incredibly thin. So our specialists in that office, our drivers, these are all experts, and they love and they're committed to what they do here for our children. And Glenn Barry, Sue Gouldley, and the crew, along with Dave Batke and the drivers in his organization, some of the most amazing and talented people I've had the opportunity to work with in my entire career. They run what must be one of the largest transportation outfits in this corner of the state, and they run it through thick and through thin, through tough weather days, good weather days. They make it look easy, frankly, for not only our district, but for Flemington, Raritan, East Amwell, and Delaware Township. If you think of the scale of that operation and all of the moving parts, how easy they make it look day in and day out. This sidebar is a package of incentives from retention to new driver referral payments to more that's necessary to stave off an incredibly sharp competition that's taking over the bus driver market and fueling this driver shortage, and to ensure the continued success of our operation. Now, as you know, we share ownership of the transportation operation with Flemington Raritan School District, so a joint committee between those 2 boards always has to consider these kinds of motions, and that committee, including A couple members from our board, as well as members from their board, met last week and approved this sidebar unanimously, and so it now comes to you to approve so that we can put it into action. Flemington Raritan, as far as I'm aware, is considering it tonight at their board meeting as well, so I do hope they make the decision here that I feel is the right decision for our drivers, for our schools, and for our children to contribute to the sustainability of that operation and to give a well-deserved set of incentives to our drivers. We've done an awful lot to prioritize in-person instruction this year and last year, every day, all day for all students this year. It would be a tragedy for a lack of drivers to bring that down, especially when we might have avoided it with some well-earned consideration like this sidebar. So that's on the agenda tonight as well, those two sidebars. A few other points, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Zurawicki and a couple of members of her staff to talk to us a bit tonight about counseling. Every 3 years, public schools undergo an exhaustive review by the Department of Education, and this review covers all areas of operation, from facilities to student achievement to operations, all sorts of things. The review goes under the acronym of QSAC, and that stands for Quality Single Accountability Continuum. It sounds like one of those things that they had the abbreviation before they had the words, right? Now, last year, given the challenges of the pandemic, the legislature waived that review process. We weren't due last year, but the schools that were due last year, because of the challenges of the pandemic, received a waiver. We're still facing all of those challenges. This year, we are up for this review. Now, we have not yet heard of any waiver this year, despite the fact that all of those pandemic challenges remain, and also, I believe, render the review somewhat inauthentic. I note, for example, that much of the review is based on student achievement scores on tests that we haven't given in 2 years. So it doesn't feel like an authentic review of our work. I'm also very concerned about the heavy lift that it represents to prepare for this review, again, as we prioritize all of our work to keep kids in school all day, every day, in the face of the pandemic. I do not believe that this is time well spent now for my staff, especially given all the work that they're doing on much bigger priority things to prepare for a large-scale review like this from the state. And I must continue to prioritize the better work that we're doing to maintain the operation in the face of the challenges of the pandemic. So I'll keep you updated, but do know that this is going to remain a sore spot for us as we move forward, and a point of advocacy from myself and my colleagues in the field to urge for that waiver so that we don't have to take time away from the important work that we're doing in schools right now to prepare for a compliance review, much of which is not authentic to the kinds of situations we're dealing with right now. So I'll keep you updated. In the event that it does move forward, we will have some agenda items. I think there are a couple agenda items tonight for the 25th, and then some agenda items in November and December that we'll have to pass in order to prepare for that review. So tonight, without further ado, I've asked Dr. Danielle Zurawicki to work with her staff and with Dr. Webb, who's also here, to share some thoughts from the counseling department tonight. We've all discussed district goals over the past month or so, and as we continue to discuss them tonight and on into the 25th, the counseling department remains critical in our efforts to personalize the experience that we offer to all of our students through wellness and equity, and to reinvent school for this post-pandemic era in the way that we feel we can and we must. So Dr. Zurawicki, I'll give it to you to take it away, and I would ask, as we're going to bring the screen down, it's probably better for folks to go out into the audience to view the presentation, and then we can ask questions from there. So let's head into the seats in the audience just so we can bring the screen down. Jeff, you might be good to stay where you are if you want to stay there.
Again? It looks like it's not on anymore. I was like, I don't think it's on anymore.
No, it's not. Jeff is getting
Okay.
There we go.
What do I do to do it again?
I think it might be connected, so let's see.
Okay. As I say this in the speaker. You're being recorded.
Okay. Oh, that's, oh, don't. Oh, boy. Well.
We tested it.
Oh,
It was
okay.
working.
That's how it goes.
All right.
Ah.
And your volume's on, right?
Success. All right. So thank you, everyone. So my name is Danielle Zurwicki, and I'm the supervisor of counseling at Hunterdon Central. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about counseling services and some of the things that we do and where we're kind of moving for this year. So first, to start off with who we are. We, as school counselors, really believe that no one needs to struggle in silence. And so that is what we are here for and what we do every day. So some of the things that a school counselor does aren't always seen. So some of the things you might see are a lot of direct service, where they're meeting with students individually, maybe in small groups, but there's a lot of other things that go into being a school counselor. There's indirect services, where they might make referrals to an outside agency. Maybe they're consulting with teachers, parents, administrators, really anyone in the school district. They're also doing responsive services. So, crisis response, I think, is something that is hard to do. And I want to give credit to school counselors for really doing this every day. There's also things that we do with curriculum. How do we embed some of the services and what we want to have students developmentally grow throughout their years here at high school? And so this is something that they really kind of work on every day. And this is the American School Counselor Association model. And so they focus really on 3 core domains: academic, social, emotional, and career. And the idea is that by focusing on those, you can help students find success and for their college and career and for whatever post-secondary options that they decide to pursue. Our team is made up of a lot of really great individuals, some of whom are here today. So we have 3 grade level counselors per grade, 1 ELL bilingual counselor. We have student assistance counselors we have 1 per grade level, so that's 4. We also have some additional mental health support. School-based youth services provides 2 full-time and 2 part-time staff members who do come in. They are grant funded and they provide supportive and maintenance counseling. We also have Care Plus, which is a tier 3 level of mental health support. And so what they do is they see kind of the most at-risk students, and they can also provide some crisis intervention and be able to assess, do some risk assessments. We also have a college and career counselor, and I do not want to forget our executive, administrative, the operational assistants who really kind of help pursue and help keep our ship afloat. So I'm just going to share a video that our student assistance counselors created because I think it really shows kind of the depth of services that they provide. And so this here shows really the depth of how much the school counselors are involved with at Hunterdon Central. So they are the anti-bullying specialists. They're on the 504 INRS committees. We deal with like the code of conduct. We deal with parent workshops, individual counseling, risk assessments, really a wide range of things on a daily basis. And so the question really becomes is how do we integrate the district goals of equity, wellness, and personalization with those ASDA domains that I mentioned before? Because that's really our goal moving forward with the counseling department, is how we can try to focus these areas in line with what the district is trying to do as well. So some of the things that we're going to be focusing on for this school year, one of them is the student information survey. So this is actually an example of what a student would view on Aspen. And so I blocked out their names so you can see them. But what will happen is we're going to start with freshmen because we're trying to provide that personalized approach to our students, not just for the counselors, but for all staff at Central. And so students will have the opportunity to go in and fill out some personalized information about themselves. So this one asks for, parents and guardians' names, who do they live with? But some additional questions are things like, what are you most proud of? What do you spend your time doing outside of Central? What are some challenges that affect your learning? And what are your experiences with it? And then what can help you kind of face those obstacles that you might have? And we're going to be starting with the freshmen, and the counselors are going to, kind of preview it, just in case there are any concerns that might arise. And then the idea is going to be that it'll be published for staff to see, so that any staff member who interacts with that student will have the opportunity to learn more about them. We're also really trying to focus on communication. We're a large district, and some of the things we want to make sure we do is that parents and students and teachers and you know some of the things that are going on. So we are working towards monthly personalized grade level specific information that will be sent from the counselor to their students and the parents. And the idea, like I said, is to focus on the district goals of personalization, equity, and wellness, while also working on those other domains, right? The academic, social, emotional, and the college and career. One of the other things that we're going to be putting into place is a needs assessment. So I'm sure you guys all, know what a needs assessment is, but that's really where we're going to try to identify any gaps in service that might be occurring. So this is just a sample. This is not finalized yet. I want to just make that known of something we might do. And the idea is that we want to kind of collect information on different groups, things like gender, race, ethnicity, as well as special populations, students who are classified, students who have a 504, ELL, and try to assess how these groups interact with counseling services in those different domains, right? The academic, the social, emotional, and the college and career, and then see if we can identify any gaps that are occurring in that service. And also about how students and parents maybe interact with counseling, because it's not always the same. There's another thing that our counselors do, where they are logging the students that they see on a daily basis. And so something that will really be helpful for them is to reflect on their own practice. So this gives counselors an opportunity to analyze the data that they are collecting on themselves, and to really try to determine if there are gaps in their service as well, because that's how we grow, right? So we can reflect on what we're doing, who we're meeting with, how often we're meeting with them, what domains are we focusing on, to make sure that we really fit all of those other areas of the district goals. One of the other things that I'm, proud to acknowledge that we were accepted is a teen mental health first aid grant. So this was offered to 50 organizations in New Jersey, and we were fortunate enough to get selected. And so in case you're not familiar with what mental health first aid is it provides actionable steps that anybody can take if they are interacting with a youth who is experiencing signs of crisis, if they're experiencing any signs of potential distress. And so teen mental health first aid is training teens on how to recognize and provide support to their peers. And so we are going to be training one grade level. We're focusing on juniors to try to give them that support and also give them those actionable steps that they can take if they are concerned about themselves or a friend, and then how to find a trusted adult. So I'm very happy that we're going to be able to do that through that grant. And we're also, part of it is training staff on the youth mental health first aid, which is to train an adult who interacts with a child. There's also some legislation that's been coming out related to a depression screener, where they want to give it, the state of New Jersey has been moving forward with legislation to do something for grades 7 through 12. And so that's still not entirely clear where that is. But I've mentioned that because, in terms of the personalization and the equity, is that a lot of the students who pass through a counselor's door are usually referred by somebody else. Some are self-referred. But this will be an opportunity, actually, to make sure that we're not missing anybody. And there are plenty of screeners that can be administered in different languages. From what I read, it looks like the state will hopefully pick one and tell all the districts to do it, but we know that's, who knows. So that way we can make sure that we're providing equitable access and that we can provide follow-up care for any of those students as well. So I just wanted to say thank you for giving me an opportunity to come here. Like I said, so we have a SAC, who's Katie Edgar, and Ann Biber is one of our grade level counselors. And so I wanted to say thank you to them for coming. And they're here in case anybody has any additional questions that the board might have. Yes? Sure. I had sent a PDF, but I can definitely get one to you guys as well. I wasn't sure if that was just for the minutes or if that got distributed to you guys as well, but I can definitely do that. Okay. Well, thank you.
Right. Perfect. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for letting me present to you this evening. I'm Jessica Cangelosi-Heed. I'm the Director of Curriculum here at Hunterdon Central, if you don't know who I am. And as Dr. Moore said, tonight I will be presenting to you on our 2021 Access for English Language Learners results. So just a quick note that these are our 2021 results. We did not have 2020 results because the test was canceled, as were the other state mandated assessments. Before we begin, I thought it would be informative for everyone to learn a little bit more about this assessment, the Access test, as it's not as widely known as our New Jersey Student Learning Assessment, also known as PARCC, formerly known as PARCC. So Access stands for Assessing Comprehension and Communication in English State to State for English Language Learners. And you can quickly see why we abbreviate to Access. It's an assessment that's used by WIDA, and WIDA is a consortium of about 40 different states aimed at providing high quality, high standards in language learning education. This particular assessment measures growth in English language proficiency, all levels K to 12, and it measures components of speaking, listening, reading, and writing, and then gives an overall composite score as well. And the assessment meets the government's requirements for the Every Student Succeeds Act, and also meets our requirement for monitoring student progress towards English proficiency. So this assessment is a little bit different than the NJSLA, which is, again, more widely known. We're not necessarily looking for a particular level of achievement. So if you're familiar with NJSLA, we measure on a scale of 1 to 5, and we're always looking for that 4 or 5 for a student, but this is not necessarily the case for Access. So Access is measuring a student's individual growth, and it's measured on levels 1 to 6. And so I did a little picture of what the levels are, and on the next slide, it'll go into a little more detail. But these proficiency scores are interpreted based on the scale score, and the proficiency is represented as a whole number followed by a decimal. So 3.2 or 2.7, and so the point is the first one represents the actual level of the student as depicted up in this picture on the slide, and then the decimal shows you how close they are to the next level. In New Jersey, the minimum exit score for an English language learner is a 4.5, so meaning they need to have that composite score of a 4.5 in order to be exiting our English language learning program. Now, historically, the state likes to see growth of 0.5 for a student from year to year, which averages out to 2.0 over the 4 years here. That's currently suspended due to the cancellation of tests and the pandemic, everything going on. Just a little bit more about the score information. And I did share with the Student Life and Program Committee some sample assessments that the students had to do in high school. And I think they will be able to tell you that they're challenging just for an English speaker, so never mind an English language learner. I also wanted to show you just an example score report, so you can see that we do expect differences between the different components. So speaking might be lowering than listening, reading and writing might be lower, and that all leads to a proficiency level based on the scaled score. And it's important to note that the proficiency level changes with the grade level expectations. So a student who's in, let's say, 3rd grade, they might measure, let's say, a 4.1. But if they took the 2nd grade assessment, they might measure even higher than that because they do change the score based on what grade level the student is in. I also wanted to talk about our demographics before we go into the results. So in April, we had a total of 59 English language learners. And I'm giving the breakdown of the ethnicity, the race, languages, males, females, and economically disadvantaged. Now, typically, if you recall, when I present NJSLA results, we disaggregate the data by all different subgroups. We are not able to necessarily disaggregate data by different subgroups within this population of English language learners because there is not that much disparity. And when the number is less than 10, we don't present the data because it could be revealing about who a student is. So this is the data here. You can see that the main ethnicity is Hispanic, although we do have 3 other languages for our English language learners, and a pretty even mix between males and females, although a few more males. And all of them are economically disadvantaged currently. I also wanted to talk about year of entry so that you can see our numbers for English language learners are in flux. So some years we get many students, some years we get a few. So of the 59 students that we had in April, here were their years of entry, so that you can see it does vary quite a bit from when they entered year to year. And talking about continued enrollment. So because this is one of the challenges with looking at historical data is, there's 2 challenges. The first challenge is the transients in our emergent bilingual population. So you can see that we're looking at let me explain what you're looking at. So we have our years of tests. Of course, again, we skipped 2020 because we didn't test that year. The number of students tested, but then we're looking at the number enrolled prior year. And why that's important is because that's what's allowing us to see the growth of the students, where we're really looking for that 0.5 level of growth. And so when you look at 2021, for instance, we tested 58 students, but we only had 15 of those enrolled the prior year. So it's very difficult to really do a deep dive into historical data, although we try, but it's really difficult to measure the growth consistently year to year. So here are the results, and again, we're comparing 2019 to 2021 because we don't have 2020 data. So you can see that in each domain, and hopefully everyone, including the people watching through HCTV, can see these results. We have listening, reading, speaking, writing, and then that last bar chart on the right is the composite, the overall score. So we are sitting just under a 3 in terms of our level of proficiency. Again, it's not necessarily about trying to push people to the highest level of proficiency at the fastest rate possible, but it's about looking at growth. But we did feel it was important to compare the results. 2021 overall was a little bit lower than 2019, although when you look at the numbers, the results are kind of negligible. No one actually lost anything, which was important to us. I also wanted to look at the data in this way as well, so comparing the average growth. So in 2021, the average growth of our students was 0.47, so very close to that marker of 0.5 that the state was historically targeting. In 2019, our average growth was 0. And I know that sounds weird that it was a 0, but it was like 0.0 something, so it's very low. But here we are again. Remember, I said that we're focusing on growth of the students that were enrolled the year prior. So here, if we're looking at the number of the students that showed a growth of 0.5 or more in that group from the year prior, in 2021, in this current year, it was 20%. So 3 of the 15 showed a growth of 0.5 or more, which is only 20%. And when you look at 2019, again, because we can't compare to 2020, 28% of the students showed the growth of 0.5 or more. So although it looks overall 0.47, we see that this is a low number. We didn't get all 15 of 15 to grow 0.5 or higher. So before I talk about strengths and areas of focus, one of the questions that came up, and it came up at our Student Life and Program Committee meeting, was about students who exit. So because this is a transient population, on average, we have about 3 to 4 students that exit per year. And again, to exit, that means you need a proficiency level of 4.5. That's on average. So last year, for instance, we had 0 students exit, but the year before we had 7. So it's very different depending on the year, depending on the demographic of the students here. Currently in our school, we actually have 10 former English language learners in our 11th and 12th grades. So that just gives you a little bit more information about exiting data. I wanted to then talk about some strengths, and it's no secret that we're in a pandemic still, hopefully at the end of it. But in 2021, all assessments had been canceled for the spring, with the exception of just a few, access being one of them. And so I think it's good that they push forward with it so that we can have this data, but perhaps it's not good to just look at this data from a historical perspective, but to take the data that we can get from it to move forward. So during the pandemic, as you know, is quite difficult for most students. A lot of our English language learners struggled with competing priorities for family and jobs to provide financially for their families. Even with that, we had 58 of 59 take the access, which I attribute to our very strong program that we have, and our supervisor, Dr. Laura Arredondo, as well as our English language learning staff. So just so that you know, the students had to come in person to take the assessment. So they weren't allowed to take it online. They actually had to come in person to take that assessment. And that was pretty tremendous for a population that had at least half of the students who were full-time remote learners. So I did want to say congratulations to the staff that contributed to getting the students come in. They work with the students at night and on the weekends to get them to come in and be comfortable taking the assessment. The average growth, as I showed you, was 0.47, so we were close to the target proficiency score. But of course, on the flip side, as I showed you, 3 of the 15 met the 0.5 proficiency growth. So we're putting some interventions in place. Our instructional plan and our new reading program for our bilingual program, we partnered with a company called American Reading Company for a new bilingual program, and they provided a reading coach who's been coming in, working with our staff. So we hope that this will impact positively the students' proficiency scores on the access. We're also looking at our curriculum. We're always looking at curriculum, but especially now we're focusing on our ESL levels 3 and 4, and that's in progress. One of the things that we're looking at is, does it align with our general education English curriculum so that students can transfer those skills when they exit out of the English language learner program and into the general education English classroom. And we do want to make sure that students are prepared for the NJSLA should they have to take it if they exit out of the program and do have to take that assessment as well. And then another big thing that we're doing is focusing on language and content objectives in all classes. So all teachers always have to provide objectives for their students for every lesson, and usually those are content objectives. So differentiating between types of chemical reactions. But then I was a chemistry teacher, so that's why I used that one. But what we're also pushing, and this is going to be a huge focus of WIDA moving forward, is focusing on language. So what does that mean in terms of the language objective for an English language learner? Can they properly argue what the difference is in the chemical reactions? Can they, maybe on a lower level, just state the definitions of the reactions? So focusing on that, and that's training we've done with actually all of our administrators as well as our staff or English language learners. And then finally, the other thing that we're focusing on, and it ties in perfectly with Dr. Zawicki's presentation, is looking at data beyond just our academic data. So looking at absenteeism, looking at discipline referrals, looking at reasons for counseling visits, looking at extracurricular participation, because all these contribute to the climate that the students are experiencing and their engagement in school overall. So that is what we are doing. That is the overall results on our access test. And if you have any questions, I will take them now. Okay, thank you. I put that.
You did my job. You did my job for me. But one thing you need to do.
Oh.
Good. There we go. Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Zawicki and Katie and Annie, and also Jessica. Thank you so much for all of that important information. We will have, for not just for the minutes, but for all of you as well, copies of those presentations, and then they will ultimately be attached to the minutes for the meeting. So I also wanted to ask Mr. Brandt just to discuss quickly with us, just to share some information from the podium, not in a formal way with a presentation, but we are in the midst of October, and October has two very important commemorations for us. We have the Week of Respect during October. We also have School Violence Awareness Week, and it also lands in the middle for us of Hispanic Heritage Month, too. So I just asked Mr. Brandt to just share a little bit about what's going on for your edification, and then I'll share more in my updates as we move forward over the next couple of weeks. So Ed, go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you. I'll point out just for the Week of Respect, and we're expanding it beyond the week. The Week of Respect through the state of New Jersey was last week. And within classes and various areas throughout the school, there were discussions, activities, small group activities on the Week of Respect. But school-wide, district-wide, the two things that took place that were actually laying the groundwork for something on later this week was that there were two articles shared with all of the students, one on what it what it means to respect others and also about self-respect. And then we surveyed all the students who wanted to be involved with it and staff as to basically, in 3 words or less, what does it mean to respect others and what does it mean to respect yourself? So we're collecting that data, and it's going to be part of, there's an activity block this Wednesday, with Wednesday's unique schedule being proposed. And part of that activity block is comparing and contrasting the responses to that survey, both from last year, because that survey actually was given to the students a year ago, in fall of 2020, and then this year, and quite a bit happened from last year to this year, but also comparing it to the results of the staff members. And I'm curious to see, and we're curious to see how the students analyze the differences in the responses between staff members and themselves. And then from that, we're going to move forward. And we're going to wrap it in together, too, in that activity block on training for HIB and anti-violence and recognition of Anti-Violence Awareness Week. So those 2 things are coming together later on this Wednesday and then moving forward as well. And then also Dr. Moore mentioned but basically a culminating event for Hispanic Heritage celebration taking place this Thursday afternoon after school. Hispanic Heritage Awareness Month started September 15th and moves into October 15th. So students from a variety of different clubs and activities have been involved in getting this rolling. And we're looking forward to a fun afternoon on Thursday afternoon. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks. All right, and I'll round out my thoughts for tonight with just a quick thing about, there are 2 organizational items here tonight. One is a calendar adjustment, and I shared some information with the board about this previously. We're hoping to run an early dismissal on the 13th. We've communicated that to staff and students. We just need your approval. This is in order to make room for the PSAT 9 diagnostic test that we're going to be running with 9th graders, along with the Start Strong assessments that the state has us running in science, and also allows us for a unique activity-based schedule for some of the Week of Respect and School Violence Awareness Week activities. So your approval is required for that to be official for Wednesday, but do know we have had to communicate that a little bit already, but your approval will seal the deal. And then also is the appointment of an ad hoc negotiations committee to begin work with the Education Association. Their contract is up this year, and so we're eager to get started on those negotiations, and this will be the group with your approval that does that. Later on, under new business, I want to share, in fact, on your desks, you have a single sheet of draft goals that we've been talking about in various different committees, and I want to talk about those with you later during new business, just to get your thoughts and feedback, because we're hoping to approve formal goals at our meeting on the 25th. So starting tonight and then on into the next 2 weeks before the 25th, I'll be looking for feedback to make sure that we're hitting the target on those. And that concludes my report tonight. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Panico. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. At this time, we now open the floor for public comment for any items on the agenda. Just to be clear, these are items that are on the agenda. So if you have an action item that's one of the items in this packet, feel free to come up to the podium and address. Make sure you state your name and sign in to do so. Public comment will be limited to 30 minutes. Everyone will be asked to speak once until everybody who wishes to be heard has been heard. So if you want to come on up for any items on the agenda, feel free to do so now. All right, hearing and seeing none. Now we'll head over into the organizational items. So as Dr. Moore said, we have the calendar revision and the establishment of the negotiations ad hoc committee. I do want to note it's just the establishment of the committee. I appoint the members, got them listed there early for you guys. So can I have a motion on organizational items 1 and 2? So that's F1, F2.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Can I have an update from the Student Life and Program Committee, please?
Okay, we met last Monday, and we discussed several items, some of which were discussed tonight. Dr. Webb sat down with us about the counseling, and tonight's presentation was an extension of that presentation that Dr. Webb gave the Student Life Committee. Ms. Cangelosi-Haight presented the data that you saw tonight from the access testing result. Dr. Moore shared a CUSAC update with the committee, and as he already mentioned, we are this year up for a CUSAC evaluation. Mr. Brandt spoke about some outdated language in policy 5460 on high school graduation, including a former grade scale reference, inaccurate number of credits, references to PARC and NJA, CCS, etc. He is working to make changes to the policy and will make the necessary adjustments. Once complete, this motion will be presented for the board for the first and second read. Ms. Cangelosi-Haight provided a professional development update on the progress of the district professional development plan, and she reviewed the October 1st staff professional development day schedule as well as the after-hours professional development offerings. Ms. Cangelosi-Haight noted that the district is planning more multi-part professional development sessions and workshops moving forward. We have several items to be considered for our meeting next time for approval. On your and on the agenda that's been distributed, there are some items that we need to present tonight. We're not voting on them tonight, save for the items concerning first and second read of policies. First one is tuition and transportation. This is tuition and transportation for special ed students as shown on the agenda. We also have received tuition from a student who is coming to us from Sayreville War Memorial School District for the 21-22 school year, transportation and tuition responsibility of the resident district. Hunterdon County Polytech tuition, we have two items there to be considered. Approving a tuition contract with Hunterdon County Polytech. Tuition is based on the actual Polytech enrollment. Hunterdon County Vocational School, we have several students attending there for programs as described, such as animal science, biomedical, etc. And tuition here is also based on vocational school enrollment on October 15, 2021. We have several students attending the Somerset County Vocational School, and these are listed on the agenda as well for programs ranging from electrical construction to dance to auto diesel technologies. And hold on. We have a couple of items for action tonight. The first one is the second reading of policies concerning surrogate parents and resource family parents, education of homeless children, eye protection, emergency and crisis situations, and eligibility of resident and non-resident students. These are all state mandated policies. We also have another one for action tonight, and this is the removal of or the abolishment of policies that no longer apply that were relative to the Restart and Recovery Plan, for example. So lastly, we have for action tonight an overnight field trip, Model UN, going to Hershey, Pennsylvania. They didn't go last year, obviously. This is an overnight trip for our Model UN team. With that, I'd like to move for approval tonight. Numbers
6 and 7.
7 and 8.
8. 8, we don't need to move tonight, actually, Rob.
Oh, okay,
Eight
it says
can also-
action
So just
on
6
there.
and 7, the second read on those
Okay, so
policies.
just 6 and 7.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a motion. Is there a second? Bruce seconded. All right, I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I just want to share a couple of thoughts with you and hear any concerns. I mean, numbers 3, 4, and 5. These are obligations that we have. So your vote, it's one of those items that we ask you to vote on, but these students have a right to attend the vocational school district, and I welcome that. It is a lot of money when you look at those 3 items. It's a lot of money that goes out the door to the vocational school district, but these programs are very important to kids, and they're outside of what traditionally comprehensive high schools are meant to offer. So when you look at number 3, you have shared time students. These are the students who spend part of their day here, or if they're homeschooled, they spend part of their day at home. And then they go on to Polytech for the second half of the day. Now, these are traditionally programs, vocational programs, shop and trade programs, and other technical programs that we don't have the facilities for. I do want to share that it's been a publicly stated goal of the vocational district to expand these to full-time programs and potentially 4-year programs. That would increase the cost of them to us, but it would also increase the opportunity for these students to get a deeper and deeper education in all of those different technical trade programs. So while it is expensive, I do want you to understand that this is valuable, certainly for kids who are looking for technical and trade and vocational education that we don't traditionally offer here in the comprehensive public high school. I do want to say about number 4, however, that in number 4, these are the academic academy programs that Hunterdon County Vocational runs at various schools across the county. None of them here. These are students who go to Voorhees and North primarily in the animal sciences at the ESC campus in the northern end of the county. These are students who go to those schools full-time for 4 years. I do believe, and we have been working very hard, Jessica's been working very hard at providing compelling opportunities for these high-focus programs here at Central. This is money that's going out the door that I do feel we're in a strong position to offer our students programming that rivals or exceeds what Hunterdon County Vocational is able to offer and keep them here on campus. So that's part of the growth that we've been talking about over the past couple of years with our magnet programs. Our robotics program was the first of those, but we do have a strong biomedical program, and we also have computer science and others. And I'll share also that we are looking at how to provide those programs in an equitable way to the students who are most interested in them, and not just looking at a competitive process to take students based on their grades and their scores, that we are looking to offer them as broadly as possible. So I wanted to share some thoughts just about those few motions, because the amount of money that goes out the door for those students, and in one area, I'm happy that they have those opportunities there. In another area, I feel like we can build up our programs to offer compelling choices here so that they can stay on campus. So that's been a continued conversation throughout my time here, and Jessica's done a lot of incredible work there with her supervisors and teachers on developing those programs.
Jeff, can I ask,
Yeah.
how close are we? Computer science, for example. I know we offer computer science courses. Can you weigh in on what might be involved to equal their program?
So computer science is a good example, because that's one that's been going through a little bit of an evolution here. That began as a program of lots of different courses that students could take. You know, they had to take so many from this column, so many from this column, and so many from that column. And we've been looking at how we can get state approval under career technical education grants for that program. But we need to do a little more work there with our staff to make sure that we have all the right expertise, offering cutting-edge courses. Is this the first year that we're offering Internet of Things as a course, for example? So we've been really growing in terms of offering cutting-edge courses there. I think within the next year or two, we'll be in a position to offer a compelling broad course for all of our students with lots of different potential outcomes that'll rival certainly the Polytech program. And biomedical is in the same position where that program's been growing. I'm looking at other areas. I don't want to just duplicate their programs, There are areas, for example, outside of STEM fields, there are areas in the humanities. There's areas in law and public service. There are things like ROTC and other things that we've talked about quite a bit as potential areas for these programs that don't have correlates over at the vocational district, in which we think we might be able to offer some compelling opportunities for our kids and perhaps kids throughout the rest of the county as well. So there are other areas where I think we can really innovate that haven't been touched yet in this county for specialized programs.
Dr. Moore, since we have a robotics program here in-house, are we attracting students from other districts who come here for that program, or is it strictly Hunterdon Central kids only?
So right now, it's strictly for Hunterdon Central students. As a choice district, we have some limitations about who we can accept for what as tuition students, and that's something that we're trying to learn more about to see how we can offer these programs for students around the county. One of the things that we're noting throughout the county, particularly when these programs connect with 2- and 4-year schools to get credit, college credit, we don't have staff members with all the credentials and masters in their programs that we need to necessarily allow for college credit. But across the county, high schools, public high schools working together might be able to put together some strong collaborative academies across the county. So we've been talking with Del Val and some other schools to see if maybe we can share some resources. But as a choice district, again, there are some restrictions on how we take students from outside our district, and so we have to work our way through that a little bit, and there might be some barriers there. Thank you. Good questions.
All right, no further discussion. Can I have a roll call vote on items 7 and 8, please? 6 and 7. 6 and 7, sorry.
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you. Can I have can I have an update from the Operations and Transportation Committee, please?
Sure thing. Mr. Thornton walked us through the status of the 2020, 2021, and IDA construction projects. If you'd like more details on that, ask questions on specific projects. And then Ms. Spitzer walked us through the financial reports, the transfers, particularly there's a parental transportation contract agreement that we need to vote on this evening. She recommended that we approve the agreement and that it is financially advantageous for the district. The annual maintenance budget, we talked about CUSAC under that. The item 2.8, the ARP ESSER grant, the application is due November 24th, and we are going to vote on that tonight as well as item 210, the professional service provider. And then we have one policy for first reading, that is to change the petty cash to include the athletic department. So I move items 4, 8, 10, and 11.
Great, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Lisa there in the second. Motion and a second. Is there any discussion on these items?
Number 8, our ARP ESSER grant. That's been through quite an evolution over the past couple of months. So if I draw your attention to number 8, we had already approved as a board that first line, the ARP ESSER line, although the number was slightly different. The state gave us, how much more, Heather, did they add into that top line? Just $370. So this number on that top line is an additional $370. And we've been working across all of our offices to identify both new programs and projects, but also some costs to defray from our dealing with the pandemic. More recently, though, the state alerted us that they had additional money to give us. And so all of those additional subgrants that you see, those 4 additional subgrants listed underneath, that's all brand new money that the state indicated to us and gave to us to spend and budget well, to budget and then spend over, they just, a couple weeks ago, Heather, we learned of those. So there's a large pot of recovery money coming in, but different strings attached in those different buckets. So we have some work to do in short order now to get this all budgeted out, and various things from some facilities priorities that we're looking at, some HVAC needs that we have, but also some communications upgrades that we'd like to do to increase our sustainability in the event of any additional concerns about remote instruction. We learned a lot about live streaming and how important that is to our community, and we'd like to recognize the success of that program by building it out even further. Mrs. Tucker in her office with her staff, Mr. Johnson up there and the rest of her staff have been doing incredible work with HCTV to offer live streaming opportunities for a lot of our events. And then things like our PSAT9 and some other things that we're running this year and next year will benefit from this funding as well. So we'll be able to do a lot without impacting our budget as we try to recover from and learn lessons from the pandemic. So I wanted to point out that one specifically as something that you approved already, but which has changed since you last approved it.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Any further discussion on these items? Hearing none, can I have a roll call on the items moved? And when you do answer, please make sure you hold down the button on your microphone so we can hear you. Thank you.
Dr. Charney? Yes. Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg?
Yes.
Mr. Richard?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
And Mr. Panico?
Yes.
All yes, motion carries.
Thank you. Can I have an update from the Personnel Committee, please?
Thank you, Vinnie. Personnel Committee met virtually on October 6th. As Dr. Moore mentioned earlier, there are a number of items that we would like to move tonight, if all board members are okay with it and satisfied with the thoroughness of the discussions. If not, we could table some of those for our meeting on the 25th. So I'm just going to go through the agenda first on the items that we are looking to move tonight, and then we can have discussions at the end, if necessary. The first are some resignations, 2 cafeteria aides, both of whom have already retired in September. Sadly, Anson Smith, one of our social studies teacher, has also announced his resignation effective November 19th to take, I believe, a vice principal position in a different district. We also have a motion to create a new campus security officer position, particularly with the new space at the IMC. We're finding that we could use another campus security officer. We have some new rates for cafeteria aides, substitute custodians, and teachers. You'll see those on the agenda under I3. We have some contractual appointments. These are all fantastic. A couple of teachers, science and mathematics teacher. We have a duty release aide and our database administrator. Dr. Moore gave interim approval for several of these, and the math teacher was actually a replacement teacher, and he's moving into a full-time position in that department. So those are all really great recommendations that we have on the table. Their resumes are attached in board docs. We then have some per diem appointments, substitute teachers, substitute counselors, with their rates as well. We have some hourly appointments. Again, a lot of these are on the agenda to move tonight because of the timeliness and the effective dates. We have the appointment of some athletic event workers under 7. Some rate increases you'll see for cafeteria aides up to $14 an hour under Section 8. We have some professional development under 9. Again, that is happening within the next week or so we'd like to move tonight. Under 10, we have the appointment of some proctors, monitors, and test coordinators. Again, timeliness is we'd like to move it tonight if possible. We have the rates attached there as well on board docs. I'm going to skip over 11 just for the moment. 12, we have some contract revisions, salary and date changes. 13 is one of the sidebars that Dr. Moore referred to earlier. We spent a lot of time talking about this in personnel. It is a sidebar agreement with the HCAA and HCEA, which allows those staff members to access non-accumulated sick days to care for a family member who is sick with or quarantining as a result of COVID. Under the terms of their current contract, they cannot dip into these days until all others are depleted. So this sidebar will allow access for this school year to those staff members. So we would like to move that sidebar tonight. And then under 14, we have the bus drivers agreement. Dr. Moore referred to it earlier. For those of you who don't know, we are in a pretty desperate situation with our bus drivers, as many other districts are. We're at a breaking point with our transportation staff. JTC discussed this in committee last week. We have many contracted buses who have withdrawn from the routes, and the status quo is just not sustainable for us at this point. So this agreement, as Dr. Moore referenced, gives some incentives to those bus drivers. They are all laid out in the sidebar. Happy to talk through them if anybody has any questions about them. It's laid out in subsection 14. So those are the items to move for tonight. Section 11 and then 15 through 19 are just informational at this point. They will be on the agenda for the 25th. They have to do with curriculum writing, salary guide advancements, appointment of Schedule C and D, coaches and advisors, some leaves of absences, and the appointment of professional development instructors, some of our more routine items from our monthly agendas. So with that, I would like to move I 1 through 10, 12, 13, and 14 tonight.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I just wanted to make a quick comment about the resignation of the teacher, Anson Smith. He was not just a social studies teacher, he's also an award-winning soccer coach that has led Hunterdon Central's boys soccer team to numerous championships all the way to the state level. As an aside, I am supervising a student teacher from the College of New Jersey who happens to be placed at Hopewell, and they are very excited. And I keep telling them, your gain, our loss. We will miss Mr. Smith desperately, and we wish him well.
Yeah, Mr. Smith's departure is softened somewhat for me by I know that he is going to represent us well throughout the rest of his career. He will always have a place in our hearts, and I know this place is important to him. So I'm proud of him going off to an administrative position in another district, having done excellent work here. I think he'll represent us exceptionally well out in the field, and I look forward to watching his career as it grows. Notes here about a couple of quick things, and again, to reiterate what Lisa shared, there's a lot to move on this agenda tonight, and I apologize for that. That's not our intention for this first meeting of the month. And the the personnel annual calendar, October is a little funny because you've started the year and you need to figure out what has to be sort of covered that's gone on since September, and there's those time-sensitive things on here are what they are. But I do want to just again reiterate, if there's anything on here that we're asking to move that you're uncomfortable with or that we need to have more discussion on, then we can certainly table it until the 25th and answer questions between now and then. A lot of this is pro forma stuff, but a lot of it, I want to make sure you have the opportunity to comment on and ask questions about outside of the discussions we've had so far. The rate increases, the creation of positions, these are all emergent things for us. Our budget can cover these things without any difficulty. But I do want to point out that we are, again, with substitutes and with aides, just like with bus drivers, we're facing significant shortages and significant situations where the state is aware of these problems. The state is aware that we're having trouble finding subs, that we're having trouble finding bus drivers. They tell us they're working on it, but we haven't seen the solutions yet that are really going to solve this for us. And there are very specific things that can be done with bus drivers, for example. If you can just expedite people through motor vehicles, we could have a much better situation. If you can give us a little bit of relaxation on some of the retirement rules that keep people from being able to work in the district after, without taking a break for 6 months or 30, depending on the position. If we get a little relaxation there, we can bring some people back in to do some work right away after retirement. And these are things that would be valuable for us, for the state government to do, but they haven't panned out yet. So what that means is our only next step is to engage in some rate increases that we hope will attract more people here. And in that, I worry that we're engaging in a price war that could spin out of control. but we need to have substitutes. We need to have, we need to have these people. So I do hope for some greater leadership from the state to help us solve these problems. That seems to be what state government ought to be for, right? But we also are struggling a little bit on the ground with our partner districts, trying to keep a pace with everybody, but at the same time realizing tomorrow morning I need subs. And if I can get them here instead of one of my colleagues' districts, I guess I got to do that. And it's pitting us against each other in a way that I worry is going to spiral out of control. So I want to share that warning, but also share that we take these steps not lightly, but with a lot of concern for those kinds of outcomes, and just with some worry, but knowing that we don't have many choices right now. So that's just some thoughts I wanted to share on those, the creation, well, the rate increases in particular.
Hearing no further discussion, can I have a roll call vote? And like I said, next time you're going to vote, make sure you hold that button down until your light turns green so we can hear you. Thank you.
Dr. Charney?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg?
Yes.
Mr. Richard?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donnell? Yes. And Mr. Panico?
Yes.
All yes, motion carries.
Thank you. Any additional business or board comments at this time?
So the additional business I want to open up for any potential discussion that you have tonight is you all have a copy of the draft goals that we've been discussing in various committees. I don't think we've discussed them in all committees because they weren't necessarily germane. I'll walk very quickly through these goals, and then the floor is open for any feedback, comments, questions. Between now and the 25th, I'll be looking to finalize the text of these goals and present them to you for a vote on the 25th as adoption for district goals. And let me just catch up to you. The paper is also down here. In fact, I'm going to grab one. So we have two board goals. These are two governance goals that we've talked about from our retreat. The first is for the board to adopt an equity policy that identifies strategic goals and also guides us as a school in the strategic efforts, the district equity efforts that we've talked so much about and that we've undertaken over the past year and a half or so. In that, to recognize the need to address bias and improve school culture, and various other goals interact with those ideas as well. The second goal here is there's a lot going on in this goal, and this one may require some more wordsmithing to make sure it covers everything that we're talking about. But the goal seems to be for the board to increase engagement with the community, including students and staff. And we've talked about various different programs to do that, and some of those are listed here. The revised meeting calendar is one. Hearing more from staff and students in presentation. That began tonight with our first presentation from one of our departments with Dr. Zurowicki. More celebrations of staff and student accomplishments, and we were thinking back to some gratitude events that we were holding for staff last year when board members came in and we had breakfast sandwiches for the staff, those sorts of things. Broader student representation on the board, and then there were a lot of other efforts that we've talked about as well. So this goal is open to consider all kinds of different activities of the board, and it doesn't necessarily have to be so detailed and prescriptive, but there are specific things in here that have come up in the conversation often enough that I wanted to list them for your consideration in the goal text. And I'll talk quickly about the bottom three, and then happy to hear questions, feedback, or guidance on how to fine-tune this for the 25th. District goals. So these are the goals that I'll be focused on in my work with staff. And they flow from the board goals in many ways, but they also invite or come from other interests as well. Counseling services you heard from tonight, and we've talked quite a bit about the opportunity in that department to really examine the alignment of brave new practice to empower the best practice that goes on there every day in a way that helps us really reinvent school to learn the lessons after the pandemic that we know we need to learn, primarily around personalization, equity, and wellness for kids. So you heard Dr. Zurowicki tonight talking about conducting a survey and also other measurements, interrogating other data toward an understanding of gaps and needs, and then revising and beginning to implement a revised counseling curriculum to close those gaps and to take the department into its next evolution. Curriculum and special services. You've heard a lot about increased common assessments. I'm on number 2 now. So not just the access test like Jessica presented tonight, but you've heard me talk about the PSAT-9, the Linkit exams that we administer since last year, and then whatever state testing we are completing the Start Strong assessments and hope we get some actionable data from those as well, but we'll have to see what the reports look like. So throughout the school year, again, using those data as we have in the past to understand any disproportionalities and gaps. We've pointed out, for example, some concerns around the academic experience of students of color in our districts through the pandemic, and where we saw some lagging data that we wanted to address through programming and through interventions in the curriculum and special services departments. So we want to continue that work throughout the school year, increasing the amount of measurements we take and developing plans for closing those gaps. So you'll hear a lot more from us with this goal about where those gaps exist and the steps that we're taking to close them. And a similar effort down in number 3 pointed more towards school culture and in particular bias, racism, student efficacy to make positive change in those areas. Mr. Brandt has done a lot of wonderful work to empower some of the student organizations that you all have chartered over the past year, and also to build those organizations together into larger groups of students to take action, to celebrate. I think the Hispanic Heritage Awareness Month activities is a good example of that, stitching different organizations together to mount celebrations of diversity and activism on campus. So I would like for that work to continue this year with some measurements of school culture. I've talked in the past about how we've done the Department of Ed's school culture survey, and that it's not sufficient to measure some concerns in some of these areas listed here, bias, racism, et cetera. So we're looking to deploy some different measurements this year to measure school culture. And again, all of this, the board goals and the district goals, framed to help us learn important lessons and not forget important lessons coming out of the pandemic around what we need to do to reframe school in a different way for students today. And to do the brave work that Hunterdon Central always does to reinvent the profession. So I'm excited about this package of goals, but certainly open to feedback, questions, additions, deletions, whatever it is, thoughts you have now or between now and the 25th.
I would just like to say I really love the part about broader student representation at meetings, because I know we talk about that a lot, and there's so many great things happening here at Central that I would love to hear more about. And, you know, I would like the invitation to be open to hear from someone from Project Trust or Aspire or the affinity groups. I would just like them to be comfortable coming to us for things that they want or things that they're proud of, that they're working on. So I'm really happy to see that in there.
Thank you. And I think where Mr. Brandt's done a lot of work over the past year and a half or so. The student council reports are actually an example. A lot of the work that's gone on to help bridge students closer with the Board of Education. And it feels like a small thing that we've added to the agenda, but a lot goes on to gather all of that input from all the different student groups, to bring it together with student council, for student council to work with staff and Mr. Brandt and his team to well, how do we want to present this? What do we want to say? So a lot has gone on over many months to continue that process. But I think you're right, it's time to evolve into a step that we see in other districts where students have more of a standing presence with the board. We see a lot of the same students present to us from the student council report, and that's great. But how do we hear from other students, and what's the board's apparatus for hearing from other students, not just the student council report? So I'm looking forward to the R&D with you, if this is a goal that the board, or if this piece of that goal is something the board wants to pursue. I'm excited about that. And parents as well. We've talked a lot. This is a school that doesn't have a PTO or a PTA. Hasn't in the time that I've been here. And I think it's time for us to engage parents in that kind of work as well. And where does the board fit into that, I think, is a really interesting and novel question, because schools don't typically approach that as something that is done with the board, rather as something that's done with the school administration. But where the board fits into that is an interesting question for me that I'm eager to pursue. Thank you, Noel.
Jeff, I just have a comment also on that goal. I know we can't delineate every single activity and action we're going to take under that second board goal, but I would like to see staff appreciation specifically stated in there, possibly conduct more staff appreciation as well as celebration of staff and student accomplishments, because I do feel like it's an important distinction, staff accomplishments and staff appreciation.
Yeah.
So if we could maybe reference that in there, I think then it's not something that'll fall off our radar.
Yeah, no, and that's the kind of stuff in that broad goal where we need to make sure that we're focusing in on the intention of what you all want to do. That's really important, that kind of language. And I'll share too, in our conversations with the HCEA and the HCAA about the sidebar that you approved tonight for days, they do feel appreciation for that as well. That appreciation happens in those ways through the actions that you take. And so just know that they see, and I certainly appreciate and admire, where your appreciation isn't just an event that you hold, your appreciation follows through to the actions that you take as a board as well. And I think that's important for our staff, that it matters where it matters also. You know, so it matters everywhere actually. So thank you for that. Yes, Mr. Davis. Yep. Open your mic for us so we can hear you. Thanks.
On district goal number 3, I'd like to just address our comments regarding student participation in board matters. And the problem is that, for me, is that having some students come here and do a presentation and disappear does not permit us to have a discussion with the students. It also, as you pointed out, is very restrictive to the students that attend. And I don't know how we might do this, but it seems to me it would be a really good thing if there was some kind of student council committee where there would be multiple kids that could discuss in a discussion way about subjects that the students and the council are interested in learning from the students, rather than just one representative having to gather from such, 2,000, 3,000 kids, and one representative has to say it all. And you can't have 3,000 there, but we could have, a more representative group that we could, in a hopefully informal way, question and discussion.
Yeah, and I'll point out, that there's a tall order there, and I want to make sure that we note that this thing about student representation is sort of written as one of the items in board goal number 2, but there's a tall order there that we're talking about. We want all different kinds of students from all different identities, backgrounds. We want them all represented to the board. And we want them represented in a way that's not just a one-off, but which actually allows for a relationship between the board and those students, so that there really is trust to hear what's on their minds, for them to share what's on their minds. And at the same time, everything we do is always pointed at, and it has to be a learning experience for them. It can't just be something that we put together. They come and speak to you. Like, we've got to structure it as a learning, so it's a leadership learning experience for them. It's a tall order, but I'm not shying away from it with that prognosis. I think it's a really exciting way for us to innovate. And it could mean something for our committee meetings. It could mean something for our board meetings. It could mean something for other opportunities that we structure for students to interact with board members. So it can have some really far-reaching impacts that are really exciting. So it's a tall order, but I want you to know that we're excited about all the potentials that it could raise. And I wouldn't be satisfied with, well, we kept doing our board reports, which, while valuable, we're in a good position to do a lot more from that with kids who are eager to interact with you, and give you thoughts and feelings and concerns and suggestions and kudos and all that they want to give to you. So it's exciting stuff.
Anybody else? Any other topics on these? And these are, when did you say that you want to have these out for the next approval of the next meeting?
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll share these with you offline, which I don't know, like we always say offline, we mean email. It doesn't seem offline, right? So I'll share this in email, and then I will take, I'll be happy to hear individual comments from you. Happy to engage in any conversation with any of you. And then what I hope to do is bring a final version, if it's close to this, if it's tweaked from this, whatever it is, hope to bring a final version for approval on the agenda on the 25th. And then we'll, with your blessing, we'll adopt these as board and district goals and continue a lot of the work here that's already underway.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to, well, is there additional board comments or new business? Hearing none. At this time, I'd like to turn the floor to the public comment section again. This is for any items on or off the agenda. So that does mean that, if you are going to come down to speak, you can speak about any topics you want, but please know that same rules apply. We will limit it to 30 minutes, 5 minutes per speaker, asking everybody to speak only once until everybody who wishes to speak has been heard. So come on down, state your name, sign in, and speak away.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Santoro. Do you need my address and everything on here? Or just my name?
Your address would be great. Thank you.
I wanted to come here tonight and speak, since I'm the only one, I guess I have 30 minutes. I'm just kidding. I do feel like I'm coming here to voice some concerns that I have. We moved into Raritan Township in 2014 because of the high ratings of the schools, especially Hunterdon Central. Hunterdon Central was awarded the Blue Ribbon School of Excellence. I know that is meeting academic excellence, bridging the gap for achievement. I also felt like it was the relationship between community and parents and students, academic, athletic. And over the last 18 months, I've come to question this a little. And as an educator myself, it hurts. I have some things that I want to share. I feel like I have not been heard through emails, and I'm hoping by voicing that opinion, maybe it will be heard and I can have some resolution. A student that has been doing tremendously well in all of their academic career so far suddenly dropped drastically last year due to being out of school and self-teaching. A counselor told them that they pulled their grade up to a D+ and they were on the right track. On the right track, a D+ in my book is not on the right track. A blue ribbon school, that is questionable to me. Another student felt as though they were being singled out because their political views did not align with their teachers. A blue ribbon school, that also makes me question that. That same student a week later was asked to stay after for tutorial to work on a project that wasn't due for 2 days. When that student questioned why, they were told they needed to swap out a picture in their slide presentation. This apparently could not have been told to them in class. A blue ribbon school, questionable. When the guardian emails the vice principal, the supervisor of the subject, and both teachers about an incident on September 23rd, and to this day have still not been contacted to talk about it, makes me question that. Lastly, if you have a student that tests positive for COVID, 2 students are contact traced for them. One is vaccinated and one is not. That vaccinated student can stay in school, but the other one must leave immediately. I realize you're following CDC guidelines, but the CDC guidelines also state that a vaccinated person can get it, can give it, and can die from it too. So I question that because I'm very confused by that. These kids need to be in school as much as they can be. The last 18 months have been detrimental to our children's lives. I know you agree with me on that. I know everybody does. We need to stop pulling them out of the school for no reason. We need to learn to live with this virus and take care of ourselves so we can fight it. And at this point, I really feel like our schools are more worried about having a gender-neutral bathroom and a student's mask slipping under their nose than teaching them the skills that they need to succeed in life, like giving a presentation in front of their classmates. If Central is truly a blue ribbon school, I think maybe we should start acting like it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
No, I do appreciate that. Yeah, and your contact information on there, you raised a few things that I know we're going to want to connect with you separately on. And I can share in some of your frustration too on, and just to be clear, I'm not sure that we'll ultimately agree on all of the things, and you know, I'm certainly eager to chat through everything with you. The contact tracing stuff is it's not CDC guidelines, it's the New Jersey Department of Health that sets our contact tracing guidelines. And those have changed at various points over the past 19 months, but they still do confuse me as well in some ways. But it is true in those protocols that a student who's vaccinated does not need to quarantine if they're identified as a close contact, but a student who's unvaccinated does. And I do note, as you do, that we do see across our state breakthrough cases where vaccinated people are getting sick. So those protocols, if they change, will certainly change our practices. But those are the protocols that we, as you noted, those are the protocols we end up having to follow. But I do agree there feels to be, there feels to be different treatment in there for vaccinated and unvaccinated students, and it's written into the protocols in that way, and we'll just have to see if the Department of Health makes any adjustment based on those kinds of concerns. Hopefully we're going to see less and less of this moving forward. I do note that case rates and other things are coming down a bit, right, Dr. Webb? Stuff's getting a little better, right? So fingers crossed on that. But we'll have your contact information here, and I took notes on the other things that you raised, and we'll be sure to connect with you on these items as well real soon. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Yeah, if I could just add, I thank you for bringing those points to us, and I think they're all things to think about and talk about, and I don't think any of them, thinking about fair and equal access to restrooms and the points that you raised, I don't think any of those are mutually exclusive. I think they're all reasonable and fair, so thank you.
Thank you. Hearing no further comment, can I have a motion to convene into executive session for matters of HIB, legal, and potentially personnel for 45 minutes with no action to be taken when we return?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.